So we're joined today by Rama Chakaki, who is the founder of Baraka Media, the wellspring of all good news in the region. But it's much more than that. And so, first of all, thank you for being here today.
Pleasure.
Would love to start the conversation with a brief background, or maybe not so brief background, of how you came to be in the region, but also what you were doing in the U.S. before you came here.
Okay. So before I start, I just want to thank the Endeavor folks for putting on such a wonderful and really intimate and deep event. I've learned a lot yesterday and today. It's actually intimidating coming after all these amazing gentlemen who've done so much. So thank you, Endeavor. So I worked in the States as an engineer, a telecom engineer, for about 12 years before moving here, and had gone from one software development to telecom job in the industry, and ended up in managing data centers and edge of network media services in data centers. So that was my time there. And I worked with corporates like Cable and Wireless and MCI, and then with startups. The last startup that I was in the States was $60 million in funding to build out data centers globally. Luck or unluck, I mean, September 11th happened, and I wanted for my kids to grow up in an environment where they weren't embarrassed to be Arabs. And while it was wonderful in the States, I felt that they were intimidated by saying that they're Arab American, and so we decided to move to Dubai for that reason primarily. And the move to Dubai, I came in as a chief operating officer of a technology company that was delivering technology to the financial services market.
Well, you described the development of your career in the U.S. as a woman engineer in a sort of a highly concentrated environment of men, or an industry that is highly concentrated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was never a problem. I grew up earlier in Saudi Arabia, and being in an all-girls school gives you an edge, I think. I never felt out of place in the university because it was academically felt quite strong. So that I think was always an advantage, and I certainly felt that being a woman was an advantage. I was listened to. There was a lot of, I never felt that it worked at a disadvantage, whether it was in the States or here. I think being a social entrepreneur was the bigger challenge because then I felt like I was outside of the industry. A lot of the people that were very comfortable with me as an engineer or as a head of a technology company were very uncomfortable with me being a social entrepreneur later on.
Great. So what is social entrepreneurship?
So social entrepreneurship is when you're trying to solve social challenges using traditional business means. And so you're tweaking a very traditional business model and putting in a social bottom line to drive more benefit to the community.
Great. So can you describe your transition from the corporate private sector, CEO of a company in UAE, to being a social entrepreneur? What was the moment that you decided, all right, I want to engage on this instead?
Okay, so I think it was an evolution like my career, and here I have to touch on the personal side a little bit. In mid-career in the States, I was diagnosed with a heart condition, and I had a series of surgeries, actually 12. And I had a pacemaker and a defibrillator, and I was in and out of hospitals all the time. And what that does, when you're sitting in an intensive care unit for about 5 hours and just kind of staring at the ceiling, something changes. First, you start viewing life as, okay, it could be very short and it could end quite rapidly. And so the things that people do in sequence, where first I'm going to build my life and career and then I'm going to give back, start happening in parallel. You want to do it all at once. The second thing that happens is you develop this extra sensitivity towards events and people in need or people that are going through challenges. And so what I started doing after that happened was volunteering more and more in the community. And the more
in the UAE?
Well, first in the States and then in the UAE. And the more I did that, the less I could see meaning in my traditional technology career. And I felt like there had to be something different. And so I did the research, and I found this term social enterprise, and because I didn't want to do the nonprofit model. And so I started left my job as a chief operating officer and started Baraka Ventures to invest in social enterprises. I didn't know how to do it or how it would take shape, but I thought, might as well. So that's how I transitioned from being in the corporate world to becoming a social entrepreneur.
So why not pursue the traditional nonprofit route? If the focus is on doing good, what is it about social enterprise that differentiates the industry from just nonprofits?
So I think sustainability is the key issue, and also not looking at the beneficiaries as this poor people that need handouts, because they don't need handouts. If you look at the model differently, you can empower your beneficiaries to take charge and to be able to manage their own social challenges. So, and it was a book that I'd read, Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid, that opened my eyes to this, where you bring traditional industries and you hand it to the people and work out solutions with them, your beneficiaries, and things start changing. And I can explain more when we get to Baraka Bits and how we see that happening within Baraka Bits. But certainly, I do a lot of work in refugee camps, and it's such a different dynamic between the conversations that I have with our partners in refugee camps and between the hand-me-down organizations that are just kind of giving people in refugee camps things and walking away.
So just to go a little bit deeper there, in a traditional corporation you have fiduciary responsibility to your shareholders. Who are your shareholders in a social enterprise?
We still have some investors and we have duties towards them, but we're always looking at the stakeholders as the primary people that own a stake in this business. So your social mission is so important, and you're always looking at how can I best serve beneficiaries who are now partners and hear them out. And so it's like a 360 degrees. Your employees become very important because you're always operating with a much smaller budget, so you have to care, you have to listen, you have to partner with them. It kind of levels the playing field, but it also empowers everybody who's a part of it.
Okay, and now to some jargon. Well, one hears a lot about triple bottom line. What is that?
So people, profit, and planet. So a traditional corporation that just looks at the profit side, whereas when you're looking at triple bottom line, you're taking into account the people you're working with, your stakeholders across the board, as well as the planet. Is my social mission green? Are we making sure that we're not wasting, and at least having a neutral impact on the environment?
Okay, great. So now that we have I think a reasonable understanding what social enterprise is, will you tell us more about Baraka Bits, how you came up with the idea for it? Did it evolve? What were some early challenges?
Sure. So when I was working on the ground, and as our work evolved from investing in social enterprises to helping existing ones change their model a little bit and also better communicate their social mission, I thought, okay, here I'm surrounded by amazing people doing amazing things, but then I look at the mainstream media and all I see is this stream of negativity about the Middle East. When I would visit the States, half the people were surprised by the pictures that we had of kids diving underwater and doing marine research, or the double amputee scuba diver from Gaza. And so I thought, how could we take this to mainstream media? And aided by social media, that was very possible on low budgets. Initially, we were talking about putting up a TV channel, which is absolutely prohibitive, and no one thought that good news would sell. And so we thought, okay, so let's do it through social media, and my technology background kind of aided it a little bit. So what we did is worked with a technology group in Palestine, and started with a team of freelancers across the Middle East, and said, Huffington Post and Upworthy are taking advantage of social media. Let's do the same. And
what year was that?
Well, Baraka Bits came out as a very tiny blog in 2012, but we really hit the ground in January of this year.
Got it.
Yeah.
But when you founded Baraka Bits, one of your early outlays was you purchased a production company. Can you describe? So
that was years back. So when I first started Baraka and wanted to invest in social enterprise, I identified a company that was doing production focused on nature in the GCC. And most of people, when they think of the GCC, they think oil cities, they don't think of the natural landscape. Meanwhile, it's very rich and it's quite threatened because of all of the development. So this company was doing it, and so I acquired the business, and with the aim of seeing how we can hyper grow it and combine that with an education program. And we were documenting this program where we would take kids from schools, teach them scuba diving, and take them out to the natural environment and get them to see firsthand what's happening, film that, and then put it out to universities and others doing research. So that was the earliest, but we failed. 3 of our ventures, actually early ventures, failed, and we failed for a few reasons. First, we didn't really understand the production sector very well. We didn't understand that being in Dubai, nobody was really interested in hearing us talk about the devastation to the environment because everybody was involved in it. Unfortunately, but it was a reality.
Can we redact that? Is that going to be on the video?
It was the reality. And while the schools were really interested in working with us, the Ministry of Education couldn't figure out how to fit our program anywhere. And so after working with all the private schools and realizing that we really care about the Emirati students in the public schools, but we can't get to them, we kind of closed the program, handed it to Jumeirah International, and now they're just doing it as a leisure program.
I mean, it's super courageous to admit that you failed. It's something people generally have a hard time doing, including me, of course. What do you think are some lessons that you can share, or what are some lessons that you can share based on those experiences?
So while the failure was economical, the advantage was, the benefit was working with youth and seeing what we can do with that experience, and how as people grew older in this part of the world, they became less risk averse. They became risk averse. So the young people were very bold and, put on a diving suit and jump in the water. They're all there, they're doing it. Go out on social media and talk about all of the wild things that you've seen, they'll do it. But someone at a university level or even post-university was not willing to do that. And that was the same whether we're talking about Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, the West Bank. And so we thought that gave us an insight into, okay, this is the market, let's work with them and let's cater to them. So when we started Baraka Bits, even though all of the investors I spoke to were skeptical and said absolutely not, all of the kids we spoke to said yes. And the early research we did with the School of Wharton University business, we were taking in rooms of half the room was over 40 and the other half was under 20. And we would ask the same questions, and you'll see an absolute yes and an absolute no. And it was like always the difference. And so we went with everything that the young people said and nothing of what the older people said. And thankfully the numbers are showing that the bet that we took on the younger generation was right.
So how do you respond to the view that the region is an unmitigated disaster, and the news that you see, on a nightly basis, is the reality, and perhaps what you're showing isn't the whole picture?
Right. So what we're trying to do is, we're certainly not showing the whole picture because we took a conscious decision, no politics whatsoever on our site. So we cover everything else that's happening in life outside of politics. And we also take into account what's happening at the time. So when Gaza's assault on Gaza was happening, our team went to great lengths to see what else was happening. But we were aided by the community who was already feeding us stories and saying, look at this heroic effort, look at this amazing young girl who's writing about what she's seeing. Artists who were taking smoke coming up in flames and turning it into these beautiful images of people. So we were able to find stories. There certainly weren't the dominant narrative, but they are a narrative. And what the response we were getting from the community is, we had opted out of TV so long ago, but here we can see a channel, on social media that we're proud to see and we're happy to see. And we've reconnected people, expatriates from Chile and from Canada and the United States, with their neighbors and community members in the Middle East, and given them ways to see how they can participate in the issues and the activities. And I think that's a really powerful thing.
So that's kind of a fascinating insight, the idea that people within your community, within the community, actually do want to tell their positive stories, and they come to you to do that.
Yeah. So our model is we've got a very small team of full-time writers and photographers, and thank you, Sami, who's one of our best photographers. But then we work with universities, we work with some of the NGOs and the beneficiaries of the NGOs to train and nurture their young talent to speak on behalf of their communities. And so they're the ones who feed us the stories. And so I'll just give a story. In Gaza, we had worked with a young man with the Palestine Children's Relief Fund. He came after the 2009 assault on Gaza to put he had lost his eye, so he gave him a glass eye. And between 2010 and now, he kept in touch. And so he became one of our sources of information. And during the assault on Gaza, he was giving us daily updates. And right after it happened, he took a picture and sent it to us of standing over the rubble of his house, because their house had completely gotten demolished. And so our writers reacted by saying, okay, now he has to get a full-time job with us, and he has to be paid a salary with us. And these are the type of things we look for, is how can we really change the lives of people on the ground? And they're able, and they're willing, and they're doing the right work.
I mean, I love that idea that you're helping generate and cultivate hope for people across the region.
And jobs.
And jobs. Well, can you do that? Can you describe more jobs? I mean, you have individual writers and...
Yeah, so we have the writers, the contributors, the social media activists, and because of what Ahmed was saying earlier, the take of this region into social media is amazing, So, and partly because we have a huge unemployment rate among the population who uses it heavily. So if you have a generation who's ready, able, and willing, just find a way to engage them. And so what we try and do is get sponsors, content sponsors. We say, okay, if you sponsor our content on this site, then we'll employ X number of people in Gaza. And if you care about Syria, then we'll employ X number of people from Syria. And then our existing team, who's virtual anyways, will go online and train those young photographers, videographers, and that's how they get jobs, and we get content.
Can you describe, just on an individual level, with these people, how they react to suddenly having their voice amplified, what that means to them, somebody out of a refugee camp in Palestine or in Syria, finally having an outlet? What is that like?
One, it's viral. So because they're excited about it, then they share that with everybody in their community. And in some cases, it's been a little bit overwhelming for us, because now we have like the Islamic University of Gaza wanting us to have a whole program with them and everyone there, and it is overwhelming. People like Heather suffer, because although I'm supposed to be working with her on an angel investment network, I never respond to her emails because I'm so overwhelmed with the other emails that we have. But I think
you do respond eventually. And I can say that personally.
And I do apologize to everybody that I don't respond to, but I think it's but then it's very grounding. Okay, there is a responsibility that comes with it. So then they get into learning mode. Okay, how do I really write good news? And it is a shift, because a lot of them are in really challenging realities. So to get someone to think different isn't an overnight thing. Like with Abdel Hadi, it's been a 3-month process of just trying to work on, okay, how do I write a story? And he keeps submitting things, and it gets frustrating, and resubmit something else until we have it right with him, whereas maybe photographers are easier.
So I think back to my own experience in 2011 and the euphoria around lots of the political developments in the region, and then some of the disappointments personally. Do you ever contend with disappointment in that way? Do you ever feel like I'm pushing relentlessly positive line, and maybe sometimes it's very difficult to do?
Every day, especially when I speak to investors from the region, because where's Emil? He's around here somewhere. Hello. So, I mean, they challenge me to keep it real, for one, because, like I heard yesterday from Khalid, your numbers matter. At the end of the day, you have to have something that is financially viable. So, how do we strike a balance between viability of numbers and then also serving something that I know is growing. So, for example, we've moved over 1 million visitors, which isn't a lot, especially when you compare us to Upworthy that had 30 million visitors a month. But we are tackling a very niche market, and so I liken ourselves more to very niche publications than I do to BuzzFeed or Upworthy. We're using the same medium, but we're different. But what I've also learned is, rather than cater to Emil's of the region, is to think, okay, how can I bootstrap to the extreme, and how can I get my profit-generating business to feed my, so far, non-break-even business, and eventually see it through break-even. 1, 2, how do I leverage our relationships to the extreme? So, the beg, borrow, and steal Robin Hood model, and then also the partnership model. And we've been very fortunate, like Racif 22 has partnered with us, a lot of the other content, smaller content providers in the region. And so now we're aggregating, and we're finding a reception in the States from audiences. So over 60% of our audience comes from the States, and it's young males in the US. And so yeah, we're hoping that will be the tipping point.
So to that point, that 60% of your traffic is generated in the US, there is a big content generation issue here in the Middle East, stuff that's in Arabic for native Arabic speakers. Do you push that at all, or are you responding to the organic developments around readership in terms of what you actually produce?
So our editorial team is very young, and they love the listicles, and they love having, the 10 signs being raised by an Arab mom, and our viewers like that. So even though it's kind of more lighthearted and consumer type content, we go with it because reality is, if you're having fun, it's good as well. So it's real. So we cater a little bit, but we're also trying to be pure and real. On the advertising front, it's been a challenge. So Coca-Cola comes with a hard push, and they want to put their ads on your site. And while they do great work and they have their foundation, they're serving sugar. So as a triple bottom line company, what do you do? So we haven't figured it all out, but we're learning.
So for somebody who's starting a new enterprise in the region, what do you say? What are the challenges? Would you do this all over again, especially given funding challenges, especially?
Yeah, never live with regret. So yes, I would do it again. I would definitely do a lot of things differently. I think because I lacked the confidence that this could be viable, I always tested things out with my own finances before going to investors. But I think I would be more pushy with my message, perhaps, and invest or co-invest, take to the media also much sooner, and also look at women investors. That's something that I didn't even consider, which I should have earlier on. Well, when I was younger, but definitely, because after now becoming a part of an angel investment network with women, I could see the value. And I apologize, nothing against men. A lot of the male investors have been really kind and very supportive, but I think because of the social element of the business, you could find a very supportive group.
So last question before we open up to the floor. As somebody who interacts with lots of young people in the region, both men and women, where do you see things going?
In the region, that's a big question.
It is.
I can't speak on all fronts, but I am always inspired. I mean, whenever there's something negative that's happening, there's a lot that's of good that comes out of it. And I mean, change always brings opportunity. I'm very encouraged by the expatriated Arabs, and Arabs in the diaspora, and how a lot of them are coming back and doing some wonderful things. So yeah, hopefully change breeds opportunity, but I definitely can't make a huge commentary on that. Yeah.
Okay, great. So thank you, and I'd like to open it up to the floor if anybody would like to participate in the conversation. Please.
Hi, Jafar Shami from METV. You said that you apply a traditional business model in your organization. And I'm curious to find out what kind of management structure do you have? Do you have like your normal CFO, marketing guy, the operations guy? And how do you recruit them? Do you recruit them from the same pool that other corporations recruit? Do you pay them the same pay scale? Do you motivate them by higher calls? That's something that I'm curious to know.
Thank you. So first of all, we're a very small organization. We don't have a CFO. We have someone who advises us, who has a position of a CFO with a corporation outside. We are very flat, and we've primarily recruited from professionals who volunteered with nonprofits that we've worked with. And so while they come from a computer science background or project management or marketing background, we found each other in volunteer opportunities. And now we're getting more and more CVs from social entrepreneurship programs like the SCOL program and others, and also from the development sector. We are beginning to see a little bit of interest from the financial sector, but again, we're small and we're on very tight budgets, so we refer more people than we actually recruit.
And is that a difference that's mainly about being social enterprise versus purely for-profit?
What's the difference?
The idea that you don't recruit from business schools in the same way.
There's a great TED Talk by Dan Pallotta, I think is his last name, and about what a disservice we're doing to the nonprofit sector, but because of the pay scale difference. In the nonprofit or even in the social enterprise, you cannot afford to hire someone out of Stanford, because that person is going to look at it and make a decision and say, do I go into Morgan Stanley and make six-figure salaries and then take some of that and put it in the nonprofit sector as a social entrepreneur, or do I go beg, borrow, and steal as a social entrepreneur? I took that decision and left my golden handcuffs because of what I described earlier, that I felt my life was too short to actually be doing it otherwise. But most of the people I come across from very formidable backgrounds won't do that. And that problem exists within social enterprise and exists within the nonprofit sector. So you still have a big disparity between who goes here and who goes there. And I don't know how we're going to close the gap unless we rethink how much investment we put in the social enterprise.
Please.
Hi, Shelley Porteous, former head of Global Entrepreneurship Program in the United States at the State Department. Congratulations on the amazing work you're doing. I wanted to ask you, what could this audience be doing? You've got some of the leading thinkers and doers here in the room to expand and amplify the work that you're doing. And I want to perhaps challenge the notion that young people will not, even from the Ivy Leagues and wherever here in the best universities, A&B and wherever, wouldn't step up to the mission that you've established. I think that this generation of college graduates and university graduates, in my experience, is actually very much looking for mission-driven organizations. 12% of the U.S. Ivy League signs up for Teach for America, instead of going to Goldman Sachs. In fact, Goldman Sachs went to Teach for America and said, give us your list because they're not coming to us. We got to get them from you when they graduate the Teach for America program. So, but with that aside, I want to offer you two things in the States. There's a new incubator in New York called B-Space. I'd be happy to connect you. And they're really looking to help scale organizations like yours that really are, driven by compelling social missions. But beyond that, I invite you to ask the audience for what can this, tremendous group of leaders, thought leaders, and
looking to work. My brother graduated from Yale, and then he went and volunteered in the Peace Corps for 2 years. And of his generation, a lot of people are doing that. It's certainly not the case of people coming into the UAE. They're coming to, and Fadi Ghandour had given me valuable advice. What are you doing in the UAE? Leave. And I was going to leave to Syria before, before what happened in Syria. So I'm actually now moving back to the States because I got a lot of support from young people in the States who want to do this. As far as what this community can do, I mean, I get a lot of amazing collaboration and support from this community already. But I think further is to get the Fawaz and Ali and Khalid and to sit down and think, what can we do for social enterprise in the Middle East, and how can we take it as seriously as technology investment? It's great to invest in tech, but it's greater to invest in tech for social reasons, and really carve out a niche for that, because it is a niche that is very worthy of their attention. Yeah.
Anybody else? Any other questions? So you just talked about investment in social tech for social reasons. Can you think of any other regional companies that you regard as great for the space, great?
Little Thinking Minds. So while most people look at Little Thinking Minds as a either technology or education play.
So what is Little Thinking Minds?
Yeah, so Rama, my namesake, runs Little Thinking Minds, and it's a platform to provide educational content for young people in the Middle East. And given the uptake of technology with young people, schools are struggling with their old school curriculum, but you've got them producing wonderful content that's very educational, that is viral on YouTube and Facebook, and it is alternative education, and it's social work, and it's groundbreaking, and it could be so good as an alternative for what the UNRWA schools are teaching in the camps. So how do I get Little Thinking Minds content into the refugee camps? And I know how much Rama struggled in raising capital from the traditional tech sector, but she is on a social mission, and I think it would be fantastic. And there are lots of others that are similar.
Terrific.
Yeah. And Liwa as well. Liwa is solving a great social challenge in terms of access to capital. Well, you're Liwa too. That's right.
Yeah. We are for-profit. I don't think we're doing the kind of work you are, so I appreciate your saying that. With that, we'd like to thank Rama for her time and participation in this conversation.